How's everybody doing? Welcome to Bible 11. I miss you guys. I hope everything's going well at your households. We're going to do a couple of lectures this week. I'm going to give you the teacher lesson on meekness and the teacher lesson on temperance so that you guys can fill in the teacher work. And then what we'll do is I'll probably do a third video this week where I'll give you the answers to the student section. And at the end of those videos, I'll try to give you the important things to study for in those quizzes, because at the end of next week, we're going to go ahead and have a quiz on lessons 28 and 29, meekness and temperance. So by Tuesday, we will be done with the fruit production project, and I'm getting emails or texts from just about everybody, but there's a couple of students that aren't sending me their fruit productions daily. So you only have to send them to me on school days. You don't have to give them to me on Monday through Friday. So again, there'll only be 2 more pictures, pictures on Monday and pictures on Tuesday, for your fruit production project to make sure you're getting full credit for your homework. So let's go ahead and jump into the teacher's lesson on meekness. That was back in chapter 28. So our goal is to define and illustrate meekness, as we've done with each of the other fruit aspects of the Spirit. We're explaining the basis and the principle. We'll show examples in the life of Christ, and there's actually an additional example that we have in this chapter for meekness. Then we're going to look at the synonyms and antonyms and how to appropriate it. And of course, we always end with a challenge of trying to incorporate this into your own life. So your book is going to use the word gentleness instead of meekness sometimes. So if I say gentleness, understand I'm talking about meekness. So this is one of the more misunderstood aspects of the fruit of the Spirit. A lot of people hear the word meek or hear the word meekness and they automatically assume, well, this is weakness, this is spinelessness, this is the inability to stand up for anything. But that's not what meekness is. If I was looking for one phrase to discover what meekness is, or to try to explain what meekness is, I would say the felt-covered brick. Soft on the outside, but firm. So the idea of meekness is you are able to withstand attacks, but still make the most important thing the most important thing. You could still stay focused on what's important. So we've got a couple of verses that you should look up. Numbers chapter 12 tells us that Moses was actually one of our examples of meekness. So if you're looking at the teacher's lesson, we start off with a review on page 238. So love, and I'll give you a chance to answer. So love is having passion for all men. Joy, class. Giving praise at all times. Peace. It's probably been a while since you've heard these. Peace is having peace in all circumstances. Long-suffering. Long-suffering is patience in every trial. How about gentleness? Or we called it kindness. So it's having personal concern for all men. Goodness, remember that one? Being pure in every motive. And then the last one we've done is faithfulness, is being persistent in obedience. Being persistent in obedience. So with these videos, if I go too fast, you can just pause me, or you can rewind me a little bit and hear what I just said. So I'm going to move pretty quickly so that you don't have to spend a lot of your time on the video and it doesn't take long to upload. But you can pause it and rewind it if you want to watch it again. So our first example of meekness from Numbers chapter 12 on page 239 is Moses. And so we're told that Moses was, in fact, the meekest man on the earth at that time. So the Bible tells us that this guy was meek. So let's think about Moses. Moses was he stood before Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." He was a man who handled livestock for his grandfather, actually his father-in-law, in Midian for 40 years. So he's very strong. Um, he think about what he did in the wilderness for 40 years. Moses' life was basically divided by three 40-year segments. He died when he was 120, and he spent his first 40 years in Egypt, and then he left when he was 40. He had the incident where um, he caught an Egyptian beating one of the Israelites, and um, actually got so angry that he killed the Egyptian, the guy who was mistreating the slaves. And when he thought that he was going to get found out, he took off and went into the wilderness, found his wife, and worked for his father-in-law Midian. In Midian, his father-in-law, I believe, was named Jethro. So for 40 years, he took care of livestock in the middle of the wilderness. And then God got a hold of him at the burning bush when he was 80. And he came back and he spent his last 40 years with the nation of Israel, getting them out of Egypt and wandering with them in the wilderness. So some things that happened to him in the wilderness, he became so angry when he saw the people worshiping the golden calf that, remember, he smashed the two tables of stone that the Ten Commandments were written on. He had the courage to lead millions of people across the most dangerous and harshest wilderness known to man. He was a rugged, wise man who was jealous for God, and he actually led them, helped them withstand attacks from foreign and national opposition. But through it all, he was still meek. So meekness and weakness are definitely not synonyms. So Jesus Christ is our second example of meekness. And in Matthew chapter 11, verse 29, he was described as being meek and lowly, gentle and lowly. But again, he had the hands of a carpenter. He had the gnarled hands of a carpenter. He drove the money changers from the temple using a whip and turning over their tables. He faced the Pharisees. He called them hypocrites, blind guides, fools. He called them vipers, murderers. All of these accusations came from the one who was meek. So meekness doesn't mean being a sissy, being cowardly, or failing to stand up for what is right. Meekness is not the opposite of courage. In fact, it takes courage to be meek. We're going to see that being meek basically just doesn't exalt self. It doesn't push self. It has a higher goal in mind. If you're meek, somebody can attack you physically. We're talking about a verbal attack or an emotional attack, and you don't rise to the bait. You don't allow that attack to keep you from what is important. So what is meekness? What would you guys say meekness is? So maybe pause it and think about it for a minute or two. But here's our definition that we need to make sure we get down on page 239. So meekness is an inward attitude of mind that yields all rights and expectations to God. Yields all rights and expectations to God. So, like John the Baptist said, he must increase, but I must decrease. John the Baptist understood that when Jesus came on the scene, his ministry was going to be over. So let's talk about some antonyms and synonyms. Here's some antonyms for meekness. One is arrogance. Another one might be pride. So again, the exalting of self, or thinking that you're something more important than you actually are. Arrogance and pride says, I have this right. This is my right. Nobody will take away my rights from me. Nobody will violate my rights. Arrogance and pride are selfish. They're determined to have their own way. They fight for their own way. Arrogance and pride seek to get even, and they lash out to anybody who might oppose them. So let's talk about some of the times when Christ responded vehemently, emotionally. Didn't he lash out at these people in the temple? So what's the difference? if he's meek, then, and he is meek because the Bible said he is, and we can take the Bible literally. It doesn't make any mistakes.